Welcome to the Exactly Entertainment podcast. My name is Derek Terrell,
And I am Sir Matthew Lyons.
and today we are here to talk about our top five movies of all time. Before we get started, I just want to state that this is strictly our opinions of our favorite movies. This isn't the movies we consider to be the top five best. This is just our favorites, and we just wanted to talk about those today. How are you doing today, Matt, before we get started?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. So I almost got a job freelance editing today.
Oh,
About to close that deal, so that's pretty exciting. And
nice.
I'm excited to start the podcast.
Me too. Let's get started right away. Do you want to give us your number five pick? Get right into it.
Why don't you go first? I'll let you go
Me
first.
to go first?
Yeah.
All right. So for my number five pick, I have Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. So episode 3,
Interesting.
Revenge of the Sith. Yeah. It's my favorite entry in the Star Wars franchise. As you know, I'm a big fan, Matt. Um, that one is really poetic, and you kind of know how it's going to end, but it still seems to shock you. Um, Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say about it. I don't want to get too long-winded. It's kind of even hard where to go with this, but the character arcs, the acting's really good, um, for the most part. With Ewan McGregor, um, everyone does a pretty good job for the most part. The story is definitely there. The action is, in my opinion, the best in any Star Wars movie. We have the Grievous duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and we also have the iconic Obi-Wan versus Anakin on Mustafar at the end of the film. For a movie that everyone knew how it was going to end, Anakin was going to become Darth Vader. It was very surprising, and there was still a lot to be seen, even though we did know what happened. So that gets my number five spot. Do you want to give like a quick summary of your thoughts on that, and then
It's not probably not even in my like top 15,
fair?
but I do really enjoy that movie. And like you said, that lightsaber battle, it's incredible. It is
Would you put
easily the
that?
best in the franchise.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, like you said, I mean, I think that has the best acting of any of the prequel trilogy.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a good film. Like every once in a while to rewatch.
Agreed. Yeah. Would you put that as your number one Star Wars movie, or would you have a different one?
Um,
Or am I putting you on the spot?
I haven't seen the original trilogy in a very long time,
Yeah.
so it might be. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll have to get back to you on that.
All right. Well, let's go to your number five.
All right, my number five is Wedding Crashers. I know you've not seen this film. It's a huge mistake. I love comedy movies,
Yes.
and this is one I saw. This one, I probably shouldn't have because I was probably way too young to see it. But I saw it when I was like 6, and I've seen this movie easily 60 times. It's so funny. There's not a single joke that doesn't make me laugh, even though I've seen it so many times. It's it has a good story, and it's so unique, and it's just so funny. This is easily one of the most movies I've watched like the most times. And that sentence didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But
That's a,
this is a fan favorite. My sister and I, we both love this movie, and I recommend anyone see it.
yeah.
Probably wait till you're older, but it's still a great movie.
Yeah. I know you're like a big comedy movie guy, so if you have this like that esteemed, I definitely need to see it because I'd take your word as like a valid one here. So I'm definitely gonna check that out. And ever since you were talking about it, I've like had in the back of my mind I need to check that one out. So that's definitely one I will be checking out.
They had it on Netflix for a while, but I think they took it off.
Yeah,
But I can always lend you the DVD.
sounds good. Sounds good. Or we could watch it, get a watch party going.
That's true.
All right. Do you want to move to my number four?
Yes.
All right. So I know this is on your list, and I know it's probably a lot higher. And we'll save your thoughts on it for when you get to it. But it's Joker. I wasn't as excited for this movie as you were. I was looking forward to it to an extent, but I didn't really look too much into it. I knew like there wasn't any like Batman. I knew it was kind of like a Joker origin story, which was like I feel like the whole idea with the character, especially like from what I know in the Dark Knight trilogy, is how like mysterious his backstory is. So I was
Right.
like, okay, they're explaining his backstory like this. I'm definitely gonna see it. It's definitely gonna be interesting, but we'll see how it is. But then when I saw it, I saw how much of a piece of art that movie really is, and what it has to say about humanity and our culture. And I don't think I've really seen a movie with like more like upfront meaning to it. It's so precise in its delivery of the messages and everything like that. The acting is just outstanding. It's it's just crazy. Joaquin Phoenix was amazing in that movie. Um, the storyline was very good. They really made you feel for the Joker, which was something that I didn't think I could do, um, seeing how he's normally portrayed. But wow, that movie was just breathtaking, and it caught me so off guard. I know you were really looking forward to it, so I'm sure it met and still probably exceeded your expectations, but this like really exceeded my expectations, and it was a really good surprise. So that takes my number 4 spot.
Yeah, like you said, I'm definitely gonna go into more of my thoughts later on, but I will say that I think this is the most I've overhyped a movie in my life, and it's still like you said, it exceeded your expectations and exceeded my insanely high expectations. So I'll go more into that later. But my
Yep.
number 4 pick is The Departed. The Departed, directed by Martin Scorsese, one of my favorite films. It's so in depth, has a great story, and the cast: Leonardo DiCaprio, Mark Wahlberg, Matt Damon, Jack Nicholson, Alec Baldwin, and many more. This movie, I mean, I have a lot of pride in Massachusetts, so I love Boston movies. And this movie, every time I see it, it gets better and better. And like the first time you watch it, it's just a really good movie. But when you rewatch it, there's so many little details that Scorsese put in it that makes it so rewatchable. It's funny, it's dark at times, and it's just thoroughly entertaining and well made throughout the whole movie. So I definitely recommend this to anyone. It is my number 4 pick for my favorite movies of all time.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard really good things, and I actually tried to watch it once, but I was having trouble finding it and getting my hands on it for free. And then I planned on renting it another time, and I just fell through. But I definitely like had interest in the movie. I checked out some of like the things around it. Obviously, the cast is like really, really good, and that's definitely another one I'll have to check out for sure. So, shall I move to my number 3 spot?
You shall.
All right. So, my number 3 spot, and I don't know if this is on your list, but it's Logan.
Mm,
Now, I thought this was another movie that was like art, like I mean all movies are art, but some of it just like speaks to humanity so well.
right.
Like Logan, just the way that you saw this character who you've been familiar with for around almost 20 years, and you see how like broken he is and everything. You know everything he's been through because you've seen it. Normally in a movie you don't have this time to know the character, but all these previous movies you just know Logan, you know Wolverine so well. And to see him go through what he goes through in this movie is heart-wrenching, but it's also very hopeful with the ending.
Right.
And I think that that's what like Marvel Comics and all that stuff is all about. It's about hope, and it's about those types of themes. And that movie, the journey that it brought this character that we've known for 20 years almost in a whole different direction was amazing to me. The way that we've had all these different stories with this character, this one was unlike any of them. And it only could have worked the way it did if we had what came before it. Because we knew Hugh Jackman's Wolverine was we knew his personality, we knew his traumas, and then to see him go through this one last journey for such like a good cause to get this child to safety. And all the deaths in that movie were so heavy. They had a lot of weight to them. Both Professor X's death and Logan's death at the end
Spoiler
just
alert.
carried. Yeah, it came out a while ago, but yeah, spoiler alert for sure. Those
Yeah,
deaths
I
carried so much
completely
weight.
agree with that. I actually just rewatched the trailer like
Really?
2 hours ago,
Oh yeah,
and it just reminded me of like how much emotion this movie had.
yeah.
And I love, well, I prefer like realistic takes on things as
Hmm.
opposed to like more fantastical stuff. And this is something that this movie did really well. And
Yeah,
like even with like Logan finding the comic book and saying like, oh well, like a quarter of this happened, but not like this. I
yeah.
love like the little details in that,
Hmm.
and so emotional. The
Mm.
acting was great. I think this is Hugh Jackman's best portrayal, not just of Wolverine, but throughout his whole career.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic movie and one that I hold near and dear to my heart, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think you nailed it on the head with that emotion. You know, like that movie just conveys the emotion that it's trying to so well. Some movies they try and push something on you and it doesn't work, but this works almost too well, and you can like, it's just so connectable, and it was truly amazing. And that's from the writing to the directing to the acting, all of that worked together to elicit these emotions, and it just worked.
And
So,
a huge credit to James Mangold for the story and the world building that this movie did.
of
Because when you
course,
watch it, you just hear like over radio that the year is I think it's 2025,
yes, I believe it's 2025.
but and you hear like the exposition in this movie, you hear in like the background,
Mm.
and the more you watch it and the more you even if you do like research like on YouTube, if you look up like Logan explained, and there's so much that went into this movie
Yeah,
that the world they created was just, it was incredible.
yeah, because I mean, people always make jokes about the X-Men timeline,
Yeah.
and like no matter where you stand on that or where you stand when it comes to the understanding of that,
Mm.
um, you can really see that like this version of Logan has been through so much. And it's so hard to do finales because you always upset someone. But
Right.
I feel like this was like the perfect conclusion to this character. I don't think anyone was really too upset about the way it ended. I could see people being upset about his death, but the with the way they did it, it's kind of hard to be.
Right. I completely agree.
Awesome. All right.
All right.
Um,
My number 3 pick is Avengers Endgame. I love this movie so much. It had so much writing on it, and it just had so much fan service. If you've been with the MCU for 10 years, which the both of us have,
mhm.
this is such an incredible movie. And it just gets better every time I see it. This is one of those movies where I wish I could have that device from Men in Black and just like erase my memory of it just for a little
Yeah.
bit, because I'll never forget how much joy I felt watching this in the theater on opening day.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spoil it, but the one moment, I think you know what I'm talking about, I yelled in the
Yeah.
theater, just went yeah like that. I'll never have another theater experience like that again in my life. It's so good. The acting is great. The story is incredible, especially if you are a diehard fan of the MCU.
Hmm.
One in the early days of the MCU, one of my big, I don't want to say takeaways because I do love all the movies, but yeah, I will say takeaway. I always felt like the MCU didn't have any consequences,
Hmm.
and even through Civil War, I think still didn't have really any consequences. But with
Right.
Infinity War and Endgame, that completely rectified the entire uh, lack of um, reality and gravity that the MCU had.
Right.
And Thanos was incredible. Josh Brolin did an amazing job. And like you said with Logan, this was a perfect send off for Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans and other characters that I won't get into. But this was a perfect movie for the 10 years of the MCU.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, I probably shouldn't have gone into spoilers with Logan now that I think about it because I'm recommending a movie and spoiling it, but that's okay. Um, without spoiling too much from Endgame, I completely agree. I'm just so like fortunate, and I know like how lucky we are to see this movie in theaters. You know, people always tell you about seeing Empire Strikes Back and you know all the Titanic and all these different things in theaters, and I think that this is one of those movies. And it was just like you said with the fan service. People complain about fan service, but if you're a fan, don't you kind of want the fan
Right,
service?
yeah.
You know, you want to be served in that way. You know, you want to be satisfied. You want there's a reason why the fans want what they want, and to like get those things and see them visually happen in front of you on opening day is just such like a satisfying feeling, and there's no feeling like it. And it's not something you can explain to someone who's not such a fan of anything like that. And to this day, I get chills and I get goosebumps at certain parts in this movie. And every single time I watch it, and I've seen it upwards of, almost 30 times probably, at least, even just rewatching those moments, I've seen
Right,
those
yeah.
moments at least 30 times. And it's just so good. And I agree with what you said about the consequences because not to get into a whole in-depth conversation about the MCU, but you see it most with Phase 2,
Hmm.
where in Iron Man 3 they take away his suits, in Captain America Winter Soldier they take away Shield, but then in Age of Ultron, Iron Man's suits are back and Shield's back. And it's
Hmm.
just like they had to do it because they're making a team up movie. Iron Man has to be Iron Man for the team up.
Right.
And I see what you're saying there, and I definitely agree. And the way that I feel like going into Infinity War and Endgame, I was expecting more of the same, and I was so wrong, and I'm so happy I
in
was.
in the best way, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
another thing that this movie did brilliantly, along with the fan service, it subverted a lot of expectations.
Oh yeah,
And for years, fans had all these theories, and like 99.9 of them, 99.9% of them were wrong. And they
yeah.
did a lot of shocking changes, especially one character, which I won't reveal. But this movie is brilliant, and it's an incredible feat for the MCU in general.
Mhm.
A 10-year franchise like that with connected storylines, it's incredible, and the likes of it will never be done like this again.
Agreed.
Although
And
people will try.
oh yeah, they will. And before we move on to the number 2 spot, I do think it would be a crime if we didn't address the special effects in that
Oh,
movie.
absolutely.
They are so believable. You feel like you're there. I mean, it's just incredible the things we can do with the technology we have today.
And even the little things like for the suit changes in the
Hmm.
movie, they had the regular suits and they just changed it digitally. Like
Right,
even little things just to keep the fans in the dark of what was happening with the story.
right,
It's just so incredible.
right. Like it's not even in it's in the trailer. So the suits that they have, um,
Yeah, eventually.
right, the suits that they have, um, those weren't even made. Those were never physically made. Those are all CG.
Yeah.
So the actors, like the directors, no one knew exactly what they looked like. I mean, maybe they saw concept art and stuff, but no one knew exactly what they looked like until they were finished in post,
Right.
which is just crazy that we
And
can have entire costume changes without even changing costume.
without even changing costumes, yeah. And Josh Brolin and Mark Ruffalo, hands down, just amazing.
I don't know how someone can act like under those conditions where
Hmm.
you're not really like in a natural position. You're filming as a CGI character that's like larger than you are, so your hand isn't really where your hand is, and just
Right.
trying to like do that must be super challenging.
Even for
And
the other actors, that they have to
yeah,
look up and they can't even make direct eye contact with these
right.
characters.
But they have to make it look like they're making direct eye contact. So yeah, it's just it doesn't seem like something that could be pulled off. It seems like something too good to be true. And that's all I have to say really about Endgame. Do you want to move into our number two spots?
I do.
All right. So my number two spot, and I
What
know
is it?
I'm kind of stealing your thunder a little bit here,
Oh, I know. Yeah.
and I'm sure we'll see it at some point, but it's going to be The Dark Knight. I love this movie, and I know you do too.
That's
Um,
such an understatement. And
yeah,
I,
it is.
I've gone on record on other programs we've done
Hmm.
about how perfect this movie is and
Yes.
how um, just how high in regard it is to me. It's the greatest movie of all time. And I know I've said that, and people might think it's an exaggeration. For me, it's not. But I'm gonna let you
Okay.
explain why it's your number two.
Fair enough. All right. So it's my number two because this movie. I don't really have to explain to you.
No.
You know how great it is, but I'll explain to everyone else why I have it at number two. Um, the craftsmanship of this movie. It's definitely the smartest movie I've ever seen. I have not seen a movie with more payoffs and more crafted storyline than this one. Everything that happens is so meticulously placed, and like to make a movie like that is just like beyond human capabilities. It's the way everything connects and the way the movie flows. I don't think I've ever seen better pacing in a movie other than maybe one movie, which I'll get into later when it comes to pacing. But this film, the acting, the directing, the score, everything, like you said, is perfect. I don't see how this movie could be much better than it is. I'm with you on really liking the realistic takes on these extraordinary things. And I think this is such a realistic story, even though it's a Batman story. The idea of Harvey Dent being this hero that the city needs, and Batman maybe being the one that it deserves. But you see all different themes, and they like clash over each other. You have all these themes about Batman, and does he quit? Does he leave this life behind, or does he continue because who else will? You have everything with Harvey Dent, and you see such a fall of a character in one movie. We said with Logan earlier how like we knew him over all these movies, but with Harvey Dent, like everything happens so fast, but it still feels realistic.
Hmm.
One of the gripes, going back to my number five spot with Revenge of the Sith, a lot of people say Anakin turns to the dark side too quick. The character transitions in this movie feel so natural, and it's scary. It almost feels like Harvey Dent could be a real person.
Oh
And you
yeah, for
saw the
sure.
same, yeah, you feel the same thing in Joker, to backtrack a little bit, where Arthur Fleck could be a real person. And when
Hmm.
movies pull this off so well, it's just so satisfying. And that was just a small aspect of The Dark Knight. The hero's journey is just so rewarding, and it's a movie that you can watch over and over again. And I don't I feel like you have a much more like thought out um discussion to have about this movie. So I'm gonna save most of it for you, but I do want to say that the Joker is up there with the best villains from this movie. I mean, the Joker in this movie is just evil to be evil. And sometimes that doesn't work. It's like you want more motivation from your villain. But in this, it somehow works. He doesn't care. He just wants to watch the world burn. And it's just perfect. And the way everything's executed is just so good. So I'll save the rest of the discussion for a little bit later in the show, I assume. But I'll let you talk about it a little bit now if you want, or you can move to your number two.
I'm gonna save that for later, just
Okay,
because if you get me started, you won't be able to stop me.
fair
So I'm
enough.
gonna move to my number two,
Okay.
which is Joker. This movie I was so excited for, as we talked about earlier. I was
Mhm.
more excited for this movie than I was for Avengers Endgame. And that had built up of 10 years. So my expectations were the highest of any movie ever. And I'm still really shocked that this movie exceeded them. It has, when I watched the trailer, I, as well as my mom, said Joaquin Phoenix is going to win an Academy Award for this, which he did
Mhm.
deservedly. He was incredible in this movie, so realistic, and the range of emotions he had, even with his laughing condition, you could still see sadness in his eyes.
Yeah.
It's like witchcraft. I don't know how he does it. Um, and aside from his acting, Todd Phillips, who directed Hangover movies, Old School, great comedies, no one expected this from him.
No.
And he pulled it off so well. And he walked a line of homage from Martin Scorsese and movies of the 70s like Taxi Driver. And he made it for a new audience with a character that's so well known. I heard him say in an interview that the main inspiration for this movie was he wanted to make a real character study, but he wanted people to see it because he was at the premiere for War Dogs, and he saw a billboard for one of the many superhero films coming out, and he said, "How do I make a movie that's artistic and brilliant, but have people see it?" And the Joker was just the perfect choice for that.
Yeah.
This movie, I've heard people complain about there's no story, and I want to punch those people in the face because clearly they missed out. And like you said, the themes in the movie about class, and corruption, and why people do the things they do, and empathy. And once again, I've heard people talk about like how the movie promotes violence, and clearly they misunderstood the real message in the movie about compassion and how someone could do that while portraying ultimately someone who becomes evil. And there's so much that this movie takes from the comics but makes it brand new and realistic. It's so good. The score is my favorite or second favorite of any score I've ever seen or
Mm.
heard rather. It's so good. And even if you didn't see the movie and you just heard the score, you could cry. It's so tragic. This is the saddest movie I think I've ever seen before. And it just works so well. And if you describe the movie to someone who's never seen it before, and you said like, "Oh, one of the best scenes in the movie is when this guy in clown makeup in a red suit dances downstairs," they would say, "What is wrong with you? Like, how is that entertaining?"
You
And
wouldn't
that
get it.
is probably one of my favorite scenes of
Yeah.
any movie in the last decade. To see this man go up these stairs so slow and so drained of life, and by the end of the movie, adopt this new persona and see him
Yeah.
dance down the stairs without a care in the world,
Yeah.
it's incredible. And even the dialogue in the movie, not to spoil anything, but with uh, Arthur Fleck's talk show appearance, that
Yes.
whole scene, brilliantly directed, brilliantly acted, and will go down in history as one of the greatest scenes of any film.
I
So
agree.
that is why Joker is my number two pick.
That
Incredible
is
film.
that is one point that I meant to touch upon, but I didn't. Was that climax scene is like nothing I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
And that was just
So
insane.
powerful.
Spoil that for anyone. No. So here we are at the number one spot.
We made it.
Yes.
But first, we got to do some honorable mentions.
Yes. Indeed. Can't forget about the honorable mentions. So I'll give you my 2 honorable mentions, then you can give me your 2. Now these aren't necessarily our 5 and 6, our number 6 and 7. These are just movies we wanted to mention as some of the movies we really like for maybe a specific reason. So my first one is Iron Man 3.
Really?
This movie has accumulated so much hate, and I'm here to speak out against anyone who comes at Iron Man 3. Iron Man 3, not dissimilar to Joker and Logan, is an exploration of a character that people are now starting to know more about in mainstream television, movies, all that type of thing. This is about a man who had it all. He had this huge company. He saved the world. He could do whatever he wanted to. He was a billionaire, but he has trauma now, and he has to deal with what happened in the Avengers movie. And that has caused this man to almost go insane and do anything he can to stop something like that from happening again. And to see how desperate Tony Stark is to do anything to try and stop another threat from coming it's almost sad, because you're seeing this man. He builds Iron Man suit after Iron Man suit to try and find a solution, something that can protect the world. And you see that in the next Avengers movie. And you even see him try and do it again in, Civil War, but you see it a lot in Age of Ultron. But in Iron Man 3, you're getting it at the beginning. You're getting this journey of Tony Stark having nightmares, being obsessed with finding some sort of solution that's not even really there. He goes from the Mark 8, or no, I think it's Mark 7 at the end of Avengers to Mark 42. So he makes a lot of Iron Man suits, and that's his way of dealing with what happened. But then this movie, he loses those. The movie takes these suits away from him, and it becomes not an Iron Man movie, it becomes a Tony Stark movie. And you really get to see who he is post-Avengers. You get to see him interact with an amazing character, Harley, a young kid that he meets and befriends. And it also wraps in this huge plot with the president and goes with the kind of Incredibles route with like an old person he met that becomes a villain. And it has a crazy plot twist that no one was expecting, that everyone hated, but I adore.
Yeah.
I love that plot twist. And it finishes off, this will be the last thing I say because I could go all day about Iron Man 3, and this is just an honorable mention, but that end fight scene, that big climactic battle, was so cool. And they just did a great job with that, and the build-up and payoffs there were just so good. Acting was amazing, as always, with Robert Downey Jr., Gwyneth Paltrow, Don Cheadle, everyone like that. But this is an honorable mention. I'm going to move to my next one now.
Okay.
My next one is The Interview. This is one of my favorite comedies. I wanted to put it on my honorable mentions just because of, the relevance at the time that this came out. And it's a very brave movie, probably the most brave movie I saw, because we had quite a lot of tensions with another country. And to make a movie like this that almost makes fun of that whole incident is very unsensitive. Yeah, spits right in the face of that incident. And it's very unsensitive. And I think it it's unsensitive, but it's or insensitive, but it still works and it's still entertaining and it's not offensive to me, but it may be offensive to others. But I still think the movie's crafted really well, and I think it kind of says, "Hey, things are going to happen, and it's okay to make light of them, and try and make something out of them." Obviously, nothing serious really did happen in that event, so it's okay to kind of play off it. But this is another movie that I think is really smart because the amount of foreshadowing is like unpredictable. You cannot predict the way that things fold out in the end of the movie, the way that they portray Kim Jong Un in this movie is so funny for a comedy, but it's also very like, what if he's actually like that? Like the way they make him this master manipulator who's able to manipulate our main character and toy with his emotions and completely mess with them is so cool. And the last thing I'm going to talk about before I go too long on my honorable mentions is the acting with Seth Rogen is really good in this movie, and all the actors, the whole cast is really good in this movie. And I think it's just a super fun movie, and it has fun with an event that was not so fun, and it does a really good job of just kind of showing both sides, almost seeing how it had people who in North Korea who weren't for Kim Jong Un and people who were for him, and you kind of get to see that. But overall, in the end, no matter how political kind of it is with the different countries, it is a comedy and it's hilarious. So that's all I have to say about the interview.
All right. I do agree with you with Iron Man 3. That movie gets way too much hate.
Thank you.
I understand a little bit of the criticisms of the plot twist, but I did really like it. And I like how they adapted the demon in the bottle storyline from the comics. And like we keep talking about earlier with the realism, this was probably the most realistic Iron Man. Well, the first one was too, but I do really like that movie. And the interview was hilarious, especially the Eminem cameo at the beginning. That's hysterical. All right, so for my honorable mentions, I was going to include Logan. That would have been my number 3, but I decided not to. So for my number 1 honorable mention, I have The Heat. The Heat, with the 2013 comedy with Melissa McCarthy and Sandra Bullock, one of the funniest movies I've ever seen in my life. Along with Wedding Crashers, I've rewatched this movie so many times, and it's just so funny. There's a great storyline with it's a kind of a typical buddy cop movie, but it does have a good storyline with police. Again, shout out to Boston with the Boston Police Department. And it has a really good twist at the end and some really funny characters. And even there's a few scenes when one of the characters' entire family is having dinner, and the back and forth between each of the characters. It's so funny. It has good action and hilarious jokes, and it's a very, very good movie. And I recommend it to just about anybody. For my next honorable mention, I wish I could do the drum roll, but that would probably not sound good on the mic.
It's not that good.
I have The Prestige. Christopher Nolan is easily my favorite director. The man can't do any wrong, which is why he has a saying among moviegoers, "In Nolan we trust," because he has earned a level of trust that few filmmakers have. Everything he makes is amazing, and The Prestige is no exception. The Prestige with Hugh Jackman, Christian Bale, Scarlett Johansson, great cast, and a really, really interesting story. It's about these two rivaling magicians who try to one up each other. Oh, and of course, Michael Caine is in it because it is a Christopher Nolan movie, and he's great as well. But it's really cool to see how magic was way back in the 1800s when you couldn't look up YouTube tutorials on how this person did that. Um, and it has a really in-depth plot that somehow incorporates Nikolai Tesla and Thomas Edison, and it's a brilliant movie with probably one of the best plot twists of any movie I've ever seen. I'd actually went into this movie knowing the twist, and it still took me by surprise. It's such a well-crafted movie, and I recommend it to everybody. It's so good, so good, and it's one of Nolan's best, but not his best.
All right.
More on that later.
More on that very soon. So, do you want to do your number one first, since we might have a slight hint on what it's going to be?
Sure.
Just like a
So,
little intuition.
as you could probably guess, my number one favorite movie of all time is Green Lantern. I'm just kidding. It is The Dark Knight. Dark Knight, I've said it probably a million times. The greatest movie of all time, in my opinion. It's just so good. You've talked about a lot of its best qualities earlier. It's so well crafted, so well directed. The cinematography is breathtaking. Walter Pfister, who did the cinematography, works with, don't laugh at his name. His cinematography is great. He works with Nolan a lot, and the score is incredible. Stop laughing, Derek, because his name isn't. We're back. We've composed ourselves, even though Derek couldn't take the name Wally Pfister seriously. So we're going to try not to laugh anymore. Cinematography, amazing. Easily my favorite shots in any movie ever. And especially one iconic shot with the Joker played incredibly by Heath Ledger, sticking his head out of a Gotham City Police Department car, cruising down Gotham without a care in the world. Phenomenal. So this, I think, is the best portrayal of any character ever by Heath Ledger, which he was awarded a posthumous Oscar for, and incredibly deservedly. And I don't think I could ever forgive the Academy for not nominating this for Best Picture. It still suffers a little bit of blowback from that.
Yeah.
It's so well made, and the story is so good. And one thing that I think gets a little bit overshadowed is, like you said, Harvey Dent.
Yeah.
Portrayed brilliantly by Aaron Eckhart. Everyone in the movie is incredible. But I've seen this movie. I saw this movie 5 times in the theater, and I was 6 years old, and I loved it back then, and I love it even more now that I can appreciate just how much went into this film. And one thing I was actually shocked to know is that Aaron Eckhart, his Two-Face face, that was all CGI.
Oh, really? I thought they were done some prosthetics and makeup for that. That was all CG?
Like 98% of it. They had a little bit of like his scalp.
Right.
A little bit burnt, and that's shocking because Christopher Nolan usually doesn't use CGI as much as you think he would. He does like 90% practical effects. And that's a perfect example of practical effects and visual effects working together.
Yeah.
He didn't want it to look like something was added. He wanted it to look like, his face was more skeletal and taken away. And it must be, like you said earlier, hard to work with like CGI and imagining half your face being burnt away.
Right.
But
like what that would feel like. You have to like put yourself in those shoes.
Yeah. And he did a brilliant job with that. And the finale of the movie, it's perfect. It's so earned. And like you said, with the pacing, there's so much tension in the movie. It does not get old. no matter how many times I see it. And with the realism of the movie, the way everything affects Bruce, it's so I'm trying to think, it's so beautiful in a
Yeah.
way. And like you said earlier, with the themes, order and chaos, and what it means to be a hero and sacrifice, it's so incredible. And it's why I call it my favorite movie of all time, because it is. Um, the the script, the plot, everything in it. I think it's a perfect film, and it will easily go down in history as one of the greatest of all time. So that's
Agreed.
my favorite movie of all time.
Well said. Well said, Matt. Um, the Dark Knight. I mean, when I kind of explained it mine part, I really only talked about like one aspect. I kind of went down a rabbit hole on one aspect, and it's so easy to do that
It
because there's
is.
so much good
There's
in
so
that
much that
movie.
went into that movie.
Right. So it's so hard to not like to stay on track when talking about that movie because as soon
Right.
as you bring up one aspect, it's like, oh, now I can talk about that aspect for 10 minutes, next aspect, 10 minutes. It's like,
Especially with Heath Ledger's performance.
oh my goodness, yeah.
It's breathtaking. Easily one of the best acting of anyone ever.
Yeah.
And it's so sad that he wasn't able to receive all the acclaim that he
Mm,
deserved.
agreed. Yeah. And yeah, and that is also, a tribute to the writing. The writing in that movie is phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Which is why I bought the script for it.
Yeah,
Because it's even a fun movie to read.
it's a phenomenal, well, god dang it. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Phenomenal movie and a phenomenal. Why do I keep trying to say it if I can't say it? Script.
It
Very good
happens.
script.
I always stump on words and I just go
Yeah.
until
Ah,
the end of time.
but that film, it
And
deserves all the praise it gets for
and the
sure.
interrogation scene, like we talked about with Joker, how that was the best, like so well directed. The
Mm,
interrogation scene, my favorite scene of any movie ever.
yeah.
It's so good. Between the acting, the cinematography, the way the camera shifts
Yeah.
over Joker's shoulder, it's so good. Sorry, I just smacked my mic.
And the pacing on that movie is even amazing. And you get that
Mhm.
right off the bat with the robbery scene.
Oh yeah.
And it's so good. Now, speaking of pacing, unless there's anything else you have to say about The Dark Knight that hasn't already been said.
Yeah, I'm gonna cut myself off because,
Fair
well, I
enough.
will say that like Hans Zimmer's score, it's so good. I know I
Right.
mentioned that earlier, but it's really good. I
Yeah.
mentioned Joker's score and how that was either the best, the second best. Is between that and The Dark Knight. So that's all I'll say.
All right. Well, to wrap it up,
Here we are, the end.
my number one favorite movie of all time is Avengers Infinity War. Now, this movie, for me, is out of any movie, the one that I could rewatch over and over and over. And that is largely a tribute to the pacing. Now, the pacing in this movie is just go, go, go. It doesn't stop. This movie doesn't let you breathe. The movie starts during the opening credit roll type of thing. It's already starting. You're already hearing dialogue when you have the Marvel logo and all the
Mhm.
different logos. The movie has already started. It wastes no time. It can't because it has so much to tell.
Right.
That makes it so rewatchable. But the pacing wouldn't matter if the content wasn't good. The content of this movie is so thoughtful and it brings these characters that we've gotten to know at this point and just tears them down. And it they're at their lowest point, these characters, and they're at their lowest point, they're encountering their greatest enemy. And that story is just so strong. And the at the end, the way it ends is amazing. But I want to talk a lot about the different story routes that happened. So we had the movie start out with Thor. Now, I've heard argued, and I almost agree with this, that this is almost a Thor movie. This is almost a Thor movie because it starts with Thor and it shows him lose. We're not going to go into specifics on what he loses, but he's defeated. He is on his own. He has nothing. He just came off of his movie where he was all powerful, but then he got instantly knocked down a few pegs. He is at his, for sure, lowest point. And this movie, the whole time with Thor, builds up to him nearly getting himself killed voluntarily to have a slight chance to get revenge and to save the day. So this is Thor's hero story. And you get that payoff later in the movie at one of my favorite moments of all time. Like you said, with that specific moment in Endgame, it got me standing up. It got me cheering. The music, that moment, I will never forget that.
Me neither, because we saw this movie together, and I remember it's a moment where it's supposed to be completely silent, and you went, yes.
Yeah.
And I looked over, I'm like, Derek, that was not the appropriate reaction. But I understood why you were cheering, because it was something in some sadistic way, we wanted to happen.
Yeah.
But it was a great moment for sure.
Yeah. It was crazy. But even before that, with Thor's payoff and his arrival, and that moment even had me standing. And there's nothing like that experience that I'll ever get to again, being in that theater, opening day, hearing everyone else cheering. You're here with all these other fans. Everyone, no matter where you're from, what your life's like, everyone's here. Everyone's loving this. And you could feel the energy in the room, and it made the movie even better. But it's still just as good upon rewatching it.
Yeah.
But that hero's journey you have with Thor could be a movie on it in and of itself. But then you also have Iron Man, who has, like I talked about with Iron Man 3, been fearing this moment. He saw it in Ultron, and he knows that a threat's coming. He says, this is it. This is what it's all been leading to for him. And to see him experience what happens at the end of this film is something I didn't expect, and something that was just amazing. The fight scenes in this movie, in my opinion, are the best in the MCU, easily. Both mostly the fight on Titan, both parts of it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Is the best fight scene in the MCU, in my opinion. But even the New York bit at the beginning is amazing. But you have that with Iron Man, and then you have Cap, who doesn't really fully get his time to shine in this movie, but you see at the beginning, when he first comes in, how different he is. Yeah. Right? He has the beard. He has the tattered suit. He's been on the run. He is also at his lowest point, but he still wants to do good. And you see the scenes again in the trailer. When Thanos has him under his glove, he's still putting 100% into everything. All these heroes, these main three, Iron Man, Cap, and Thor, are at their lowest points, but they're still giving everything they have to defeat Thanos. And that just goes to show us that even when we're at our lowest points, we can still fight, and we can still, you still have to try. And that's just such a strong narrative, and that's such a strong lesson. And it's such a tragic lesson too, and a tragic story. So that's how I really love this movie. But the only reason it gets all that is because of the directing, the acting. Josh Brolin, Robert Downey Jr., everyone does such a great job in this movie. It even lands the comedy that it goes for really, really well. This movie will make you laugh, it will make you cheer, and it will make you cry. And it's just unlike any other movie I've seen. that's all I have to say about Infinity War for now before I keep rambling.
Yeah. And I like how I had Endgame and you had Infinity War on our list because
Yeah.
it's really one whole story, one epic together,
Yeah.
and both parts of this amazing story are in, incredible amounts, not amounts, incredible pieces of art. I'll say.
I agree. And yeah, I'm glad we got to talk about both as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
All right, that's the end of episode 1 of Exactly Entertainment.
absolutely. Thank you guys for watching. Be on the lookout for episode 2. Subscribe if you want to see more from us on our YouTube channel. Anything else to say, Matt?
Um, if you have not seen The Dark Knight, don't even approach me. What? No, in all seriousness, watch that movie. Watch all the movies on this list that you haven't seen, whether you like them or not. Just
Even though I spoiled Logan.
it's it's cool to know that how different pieces of art like film affect people in different ways. I think that's really amazing, and one of the reasons why I love film and TV so much is that it can elicit huge emotional responses in different ways for millions and millions of people.
All right.
So yeah,
Well,
I think that's a good note to end on.
absolutely. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next episode.